Hi, my name is Deborah Fox, and I'm going to tell you how Death Valley got its name. The name Death Valley was first uttered by a few of the Death Valley 49ers. The Death Valley 49ers were a splintered group of gold rush pioneers who got lost in the Great Basin Desert in 1849. Most were bachelors, but there were a few families. William Lewis Manley, John Rogers, the Bennett family, and the Arcane family were a small but important part of the Death Valley 49ers. The suffering this particular group endured while on their trip to the goldfields was the inspiration for the name Death Valley. The Death Valley 49ers were too late in the season to cross the Sierra Nevada mountains to get to California. Instead, they took the old Spanish Trail. By the time they reached southwest Utah, a phony map had circulated the wagon train. The Death Valley 49ers were part of the luckless group that decided to follow this bogus map. The Death Valley 49ers scattered into splintered groups as they wandered lost across the Great Basin Desert. This terrain is extremely rough and dry. It's a barren wasteland for hundreds of miles. They couldn't agree on a route. They ran out of food and were lost. They abandoned their worldly possessions and were forced to eat their cattle. This was bad news. Cattle was an asset. It provided dairy products, which could be traded for other necessities. The scattered group stumbled into Death Valley, starving and completely exhausted. The sad irony is they were less than 50 miles from the old Spanish Trail and the original wagon train they left. In Death Valley, the families and straggling bachelors were convinced they couldn't cross the Panamint Mountains. The group elected William Lewis Manley and John Rogers to march to settlement, obtain supplies, come back, and lead them out. The trip took weeks, and the men walked nearly 500 miles on their rescue mission. Only 8 miles shy of the family camp, the two men came across the corpse of Richard Culverwell, one of the straggling bachelors the men had left weeks prior. Luckily, William Lewis Manley and John Rogers found the families alive. On their exit from Death Valley, they buried the body of Richard Culverwell. On top of the Panamint Mountains, William Lewis Manley, Asa Hale Bennett, and John Arcane surveyed the waterless miles they had crossed. Fresh in their mind was the burial of Richard Culverwell. The three men uttered the words, "Goodbye, Death Valley." From William Lewis Manley's autobiography, Death Valley in '49, quote, "Just as we were ready to leave and return to camp, we took off our hats and then, overlooking the scene of so much trial, suffering, and death, spoke the thought uppermost, saying, 'Goodbye, Death Valley.'" This particular group of Death Valley 49ers survived the ordeal. William Lewis Manley and his group were barely out of the Death Valley area before others who were part of the original wagon train were returning to the area. Some had discovered gold. In fact, in late 1860, William Lewis Manley and Asa Hale Bennett returned to the Death Valley area to prospect for gold. Along with them was a grubstaker named Caesar Twitchell. A grubstaker is a person who trades merchandise or provisions for a stake in the mine. This particular prospecting trip didn't go well. The group returned empty-handed, and it was the end of the decades-long relationship William Lewis Manley had with Asa Hale Bennett. I extensively covered the complicated relationship William Lewis Manley had with Asa Hale Bennett in my graphic novel, The Man Who Beat Death Valley. On this prospecting trip in 1860, Bennett and Manley recounted their horrific trip across the desert, and they referred to the place where they buried Culverwell as Death Valley. When Twitchell returned to Los Angeles, he spoke with the Los Angeles Star reporter and mentioned that the place that they were prospecting near was called Death Valley. In March of 1861, the name Death Valley appears in print for the first time. In April of 1861, a California boundary survey party adopted the name Death Valley. The name was in popular use by 1866. From that point on, Death Valley had its official name.
The Man Who Beat Death Valley, the thrilling new graphic novel that reveals the incredible true story of how Death Valley earned its lethal name. Order now at debfoxdesign.com.